Hello, welcome back to a special edition of Inside the Birds. Geoff Mosher with our analytics expert, our contract expert, Sam Finkel. And this is the second part of our series where last part, it's really been a four-part series. We've done all the in-house Eagles free agents from Becton to Bond to Williams, Isaiah Rodgers, Burks, Josh Sweat, and have had Sam comment on predictive modeling and what they expect to make in free agency. And since that, the first one, obviously, Bond has re-signed with the Eagles. And we're getting closer, Sam, to the start of the new league year. And, of course, that noon Monday deadline for when the real craziness begins. So in this episode, we just wanted to look at the NFL cornerback landscape because, as we talked in the last episode, there's a chance Isaiah Rodgers and Slay are not back, probably a better than average chance that both of them are not back, and the Eagles will have to then make a decision. Do they move Cooper DeJean outside, or do they keep him at nickelback where he was so valuable and just look for an outside corner? But, Sam, the outside corner market is a very expensive one, even if you're on sort of guys with one-year prove-it deals. I know last pod I made this mention. I mean, Stephon Gilmore, who's good. I mean, he's a former defensive player of the year, but he was on a one-year $10 million deal with the Vikings last year. So that's, and we talked about Slay's actual play. The modeling would show is worth $16 million a year, even if it was a 1 year deal. So if the Eagles want to go sort of shopping here in free agency, it could be costly depending on what they're looking for.
Absolutely.
So we went through a couple of names. Some of them will be familiar names. Who would you like to start with and looking at, or what overall vibe do you get about this free agent cornerback group?
Expensive, I think, at the top. We didn't even look at some of the top end options because they're just not choices.
Right.
So.
I did tell, just for our listeners, I told Sam, let's not focus on who are the names that like the Charvarius Wards, right? Who else was up there? Asante Samuel Jr. Or did we do?
We did Asante Samuel
we did
Jr.
Do Asante Jr. Right.
Reed.
Oh yeah, DJ Reed. Right. Yeah.
So there's some high end guys for sure.
I think if the Eagles were to bring in,
too.
Yeah, if the Eagles were to bring in a corner who's young and expensive per se, it would probably be something in a trade market where they have some cost control or they can work out an extension. But it's hard to go.
Very Howie.
Yes, that does feel very, very Howie. Kind of like how they got CJ Gardner-Johnson, right? But let's go through some of the corners who will be free agents. I did mention Asante Samuel Jr. Why don't we start with him? What would you be looking at?
Yeah, so Asante Samuel Jr. was a very difficult one, mainly just because he's dealt with some injuries and like a little bit of a rough season this year. But based on that model that we explained last time, it looks like his value, again, this is just, fair market value. This is not what he's going to actually get, would be at $9.3 million.
Okay.
And we got that way through looking at some of his statistics. He had greater than average snaps per game, but also one of the highest missed tackle rates among corners this year. He also, go ahead, say what you're going to say.
You know what I was going to say, right?
Yep.
What was I going to say?
About his father.
I was very good. A little like father, and trust me, I really enjoyed covering Asante Samuel Sr. as an Eagle. I thought he was a really good player for them, a little bit underrated because of he gave up yards, but he was such a great playmaker, had some huge playoff games for the Eagles. I like Asante Samuel, but yeah, he was not a tackler.
I'm going to do one thing that I don't normally do in these podcasts. I'm going to take my expert cap off for a second and put my fan cap on. Asante Samuel was my favorite player, Eagle, maybe of all time.
Oh, wow. That's huge. That's a big statement right there.
I have 3 Asante Samuel jerseys, including a Pro Bowl one. And it might have just been because when I was a kid, I saw Samuel on a jersey. And being Samuel myself, I was like, gotta love this guy. So I have to put that out there. I did not affect my model, but love you, Asante Samuel. It would be cool to have another familiar face.
Sure.
But honestly, my model tells us it's probably not a good idea.
Okay. And is that because of the price tag probably being in that you have it as a $10 to $15 million range?
Yeah, that's what I expect. This last year was so fluky for him. It may even be lower, honestly, if teams really think that's how he is.
Mm-hmm.
But basically with that $9.3 million, fair market value, if he's in the 10, you're already at a loss. So it wouldn't be worth it. As much as I'd love to get another Samuel Jr. jersey this time, it shouldn't be the case for the Eagles.
Now his QBR against at 87.3 is pretty good. I mean, when you compare comparatively to the other corners on the landscape there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the better ones, but it's still within one standard deviation. And I know I'm getting really technical here, but what all that means is that like basically 68% of the data falls within one standard deviation each way,
mm-hmm.
and it's still within that like area. So it looks special, but it's not really. I mean, it puts him in the 35th percentile
mm-hmm.
Among corners. So meaning that he is in the top 35%, I guess his percentile rank. And so that is pretty special, but it's not as special as even his snaps per game was, 33rd percentile. So
got it.
Some context to it,
Yeah. So let's talk then about, I mentioned him already, Kristian Fulton. He was drafted by the Titans. I believe he was a first-round pick. By the Titans. Second round pick. I'm sorry, second rounder. After 4 years, didn't get an extension, went to the Chargers, started 15 games, and he is now a free. It's usually when you get to that point when two teams are letting you get into free agency, you get that journeyman prospect, because if he doesn't re-sign with the Chargers, he'll be on his third team in 3 years.
That's a tough thing to have, especially at a position like corner.
Mm-hmm.
But again, my model has him above average, right? So we had the average corner at 6.9 million fair market value. Kristian Fulton, according to my model, was at 7.562 for the actual fair market value, which is it's not nothing, but it's still relatively cheap compared to some of the other guys we're going to be talking about.
Right. Because I think the modeling would show here he's been a starting corner, right? And so starting corners make, as you said, they're expensive, even if they're not very good. However, last year to get to the Chargers, I think he signed a 1 year, something like $3.5-4 million deal. So it feels like a year later, and maybe not much that better, or the market maybe being different for corners in general may help him a little bit because there aren't that many really good corners out there. But I felt like your average low versus average high of 3 to 7.5 probably would fall closer to the 3 to 4 there than the 7 to 7.5.
I would agree with that. I think he's probably going to be closer to that, which is actually a really good thing if you're the Eagles, right? Because assuming my model, is the perfect model and, it captures the value accurately,
right?
It would mean that you're getting like a $3.5 million, value,
sure,
in excess of the contract. So it's actually a pretty good thing that his market's low for a team perspective, at least. I'm sure him and his agents want to, capture as much value as possible.
Right.
But from strictly a team perspective, it's actually pretty good.
It is, because it's the kind of contract that you can give a guy and be happy with, but also you don't have to hand him the starting job. He can compete with Keely Ringo. He can compete with somebody you draft, compete with Cooper DeJean to ultimately decide which one. And if you wind up, he's your top backup and you're paying $3.5 million for him backup. Well, that's what they tried to do with Greedy Williams 2 years ago, and it just didn't work out. I think they gave Greedy 2.5, if I'm not mistaken.
Sounds right.
And now this is 2 years later, so you have to factor in inflation. So that would make, you're right. If you can get him into that 3 to 4 range, I think that would make sense. Let's go to, I really like this guy, Paulson Adebo from the Saints.
Also very big fan of Paulson Adebo. And my model was a decent fan of him too. Based on his play, it puts him at 12.8 million a year. And based on what we know about his contract, it could be anywhere from 10 to 15 million. So it just depends on if you can get it within that range, of excess value. So you get him closer to the 10 million rather than the 15 million. Then it's an overpay.
He's a guy who I think has inside-outside versatility, if I'm not mistaken. Played some slot with the Saints, right? So I'm not 100% sure. I know he's had some injuries. I think he had a broken femur to end his year
Yeah,
last year.
he definitely did not play as much as he probably would have liked, and probably Saints fans would have liked, and that has limited him. But I still think what separates him and what's super interesting is when he does play and when he's able to be on the field, he has 62.29 snaps per game, which again, the average is 50.89. That actually is a pretty
Is
significant.
that because he also played special teams then?
No, those are just coverage snaps. Like that's yeah.
Shows you how much the Saints defense was on the field.
I guess so.
But no,
And
because of his versatility, right? And if you can get him not at that number that the predictive model says, but maybe because of the injury or the market not being there, if he's on the lower end, 9 to 10 million, then maybe you have something there, and you have a potential juxtaposition if you like him both inside outside with Cooper DeJean. If you felt like you wanted to move Cooper outside.
versatility is never a bad thing. I do want to say that, like, in pass coverage, he is elite. So if you look, he is in the 0.06 percentile of quarterback rating allowed, 67, with the average at 95. So
wow. Yeah. So,
like,
I mean, he's probably going to get a pretty good deal. The one that the Eagles are probably not going to want to be in on, if that's the case. If he gets anywhere in that north of 10 million to 15 million range, I mean, he's going to be, starting for like, somebody who has a lot of money.
Absolutely. But again, you never know how this market actually works. And, we can talk numbers all day, but it doesn't matter. It only matters with who's willing to put the paycheck out and.
Right. Carlton Davis is another interesting name, only because he had a nice career in Tampa starting off, and then he signed the deal, went through injuries, then he got traded to the Lions for his last year. One of the few guys that actually was able to play double-digit games on defense for the Lions.
Poor Lions.
Yeah, played 13 games. But what does the market say about him? Or I'm sorry, the modeling say about him?
Yeah, the modeling has him around 13.1 million. And, you look at his stats and they're pretty close to average. So, like, I guess it makes sense. Like, that's the problem is, like, what actually inflates him is his body of work, right? It's not just this year. If it was just this year, he probably would be making close to that $6.97 million range. But he's been able to do some things when he is healthy and able to play, that has been somewhat impressive and has brought his numbers up. And when you look at that in comparison to what his market would be, which appears to be between 13 and 17 million, it seems like a team is going to overpay on him.
Yeah.
Assuming that those are correct, parameters, that a team is going to overpay on him.
Yeah, he's 28, so you feel like I could see a team giving him a 3-year deal with not much in that third year, because that'll be year 30. You're trying to get him for this year and next year while he's still in his prime, and you said still plays like a league average number 2 corner, which is going to cost you, 13. You can even say 13 is a little bit under if Slay was going to give you 16, but he's more of a number 1. So yeah, I think that makes sense and probably makes him out of the range. Now, you never know if the market's not there, then maybe he tries to go with a 1-year prove it deal route. But even that is probably going to be north of 8 or 9, I would think.
I would think so too. But if that's the case, I mean, his fair market value is still at that 13 number, and you could take a swing potentially.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're the Eagles and you only want him for 1 year, you can sign him to the quote unquote 1-year deal that has 4 or 5 dummy years, and you're paying, like $1 million for 5 years of dead cap, and then only really giving him $4 million, on the books for the year 1.
Void years are such a cool concept. We should talk about them sometime. We could maybe do a whole separate video on them.
Man. Yes. Let's go to a familiar face, Rasul Douglas, who actually started off his career with the Eagles, never got the extension, wound up bouncing around from the Packers to, I forget the second. Was the Packers somebody else than the Bills, right?
Yeah. I think it was only those 3, but
I might be wrong. There was another team in between there.
It's possible.
But he's managed to kind of like say, Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
Then Green Bay, then Buffalo. He's 30 years old though now. So this screams to me 1-year journeyman deal.
Yeah. And the model probably supports that notion. It has him at 8.68 million, which is again slightly above league average. And if you look at his statistics, it kind of makes sense, right? I mean, he had a little bit more snaps per game. He was better at making tackles. He had a significantly worse quarterback rating allowed, and he had a worse yards per target. So, I mean, he plays more and he tackles better, but does he cover better? Not necessarily.
Yeah, he's a guy that if I'm the Eagles, I'm not signing to be a definitive starter. I'm adding for depth because I know he's got proven experience. I know he can come in and play some snaps and play. I know I'm going to have to do something differently defensively. I may have to help him out a little bit more, but I can play him. He's functional.
Absolutely. And there is value to that, but it's just not at the price range. I mean, he's projected to probably get anywhere from 9 to 14 million. And if his fair market value is 8.6, it's an overpay at this. It's a non-starter. You're just overpaying instantly.
Yeah. I think this is where age will tinker with that model a little bit. And, if he gets 9 to 14 on a 1 year, I'd be shocked.
Yeah.
If he got more than 1 year, I'd be shocked. At this point, I think 6 to 8 is probably the number, based on his experience and what he can do versus his age.
Yeah. And I totally could see that. It just, who knows?
And again, the smart teams like the Eagles, they'll say, all right, that's still too high, but we'll get him for 1 year. We'll spread out that 6 to 8 on it with a bunch of dummy years. We don't mind taking 500,000 a year for the next 4 or 5, 6 years off the dead cap just to be able to spread it out. The Eagles have done that before. So that's a sort of a fancy way that they have of lowering the number from what it really is. All right. Was there one guy? Oh, yeah. The one guy that probably gave you fits was another Green Bay guy, Eric Stokes, right?
Yeah, he was very tough, mainly because he played a lot in the beginning of the year and not so much near the end. I think he had like 1 snap against the Eagles in the playoffs. And I want to check that number as to what it was when they first played, but it was obviously significantly different.
Right. It seemed like he never he wasn't a second-round pick of the Packers out of Georgia.
He was a first-round pick.
Oh, he was a first-round pick. Yeah, you're right. You're right. And he played 17 games. So this wasn't like he wasn't playing because he was injured. He only started 7. He really just hasn't panned out for them. He only played 54% of the defensive snaps for the Packers last year. And I'm going to guess, to your point, it started off a lot more and then became a lot less.
Yeah, it seems like he lost trust, or they thought they couldn't put him out there for some reason, or we just won't really know. But it's weird because, like, if you look at his stats compared to average, I mean, he's right there or better in almost every stat. I mean, obviously snaps per game is going to be less because he didn't play that many snaps. He had 32 or 32.67. So, but he tackled at 6.7%, only missed 6.7% of his tackles. And again, the average was 12.67. So that's a significant difference. His QBR allowed was 96.7 when the average is 95. And the yards per target was 6.04 and the average is 7.67. So that's no joke difference. Like that's a pretty, he was at average or a little bit better in every other stat.
Right. And that's sort of why while your modeling would predict an average of just under 10 million, the context of him losing his starting job, not playing a lot, being a cast off here, former first rounder, puts him closer, as you have it, to 2.5 to 5 million.
Which is why I love it. If you can get him to produce at that level, the excess value you're getting by having a player like that, especially if you can get him on the field for more than what he was and he can produce at that level, is pretty substantial.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he probably falls in that 2.5 to 5 range and probably closer to 2.5 on a 1 year.
For sure. And honestly, like if that is what they signed, I mean, you're getting $7 million in excess value. So that would be an amazing signing.
Yes. As long as he played.
As
above
long as he played, yes.
average value.
Caveat.
All right, good stuff. So that is a look at what the cornerback market free agency looks like once you get past the top 3 or 4 guys. It's a very, very cloudy, murky market with numbers all over the place. There are some guys who I think could come in and help the Eagles as far as competing for that job, but it doesn't seem like a position that even if the Eagles lose Slay and Rodgers, that they're going to pour a lot of money in, especially when they have the optionality of Cooper DeJean and the trade market that Howie is really known for being able to use to his advantage.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%.
All right, good stuff. Sam, thank you so much. Really interesting look at that market and just a great series altogether with the Eagles in-house free agents. And I'm sure we'll have you back soon after maybe the signing spree, and we'll get into some more of those contracts, what they look like versus valuation versus evaluation. All right?
Sounds good.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. For Sam Finkel, I'm Geoff Mosher. You've been listening to a special edition of Inside the Birds.